There is a day in everyone's life when we become who we are now. A node, a slip, an opportunity. The day we lost something, the day we found it again. For Thandiwe Muriu, that day was when her father gifted her a camera. He didn't want her to become a photographer, mind you. He wanted for her and for her sisters to become independent women.
As a young girl growing up in Kenya with my sisters, my father had this list of things he wanted us to try because he wanted us to be well-rounded adults. He wanted to prepare us for life, especially since we were coming from a context where women are prepared to be wives, they're prepared to be mothers, but they're not necessarily prepared to be independent, strong individuals.
Mr. Muriu had a long list of traditionally male activities he wanted his daughters to learn. The list included things like changing the tire on a car, changing out a busted light bulb, and using a camera. Photography wasn't, strictly speaking, a men-only activity. Mr. Muriu had included it because it has always been a personal interest of his. He hoped that at least one of his daughters, as they worked their way through the list, would fall in love with that miraculous little box. And so, one afternoon, 14-year-old Thandiwe comes home from school, and her father says, "Try this."
When he put a camera in my hand, I never put it down. It was just instant chemistry. Every day after school, I would run home, finish my homework, beg my dad to give me his old camera to use. Photography is like riding a bike. It's a very practical skill, very hands-on. And so, because there was no schools here teaching photography, I would just try and press every button on the camera.
Independent learning, the lack of rules and teachers, become Thandiwe's chance at freedom. She learns basics and techniques by reading through old secondhand photography magazines her father buys from itinerant sellers. Then the internet arrives at their home in Nairobi, and she discovers YouTube, a window onto the world, both at large and that of photography. Tutorials, sure, but also so many sources of inspiration. Her first experiments in her life as a photographer are entirely home-based. She steals her sister's Vogue magazine collection and tries recreating the covers in the yard.
I would do these portraiture sessions with my sisters. I would convince them on the weekends, please, could you model for me and let's try and recreate the cover of this Vogue magazine that we bought on the side of the road. Because I was a teenager with no money, my mom was very helpful in giving me some creative ideas to create my first studio. My first studio was bed sheets and foil paper, and I felt so professional.
Her sisters start posting Thandiwe's photos on their Facebook profiles, back when it was still popular among younger online users. The photos are a hit. They're being shared, people start asking to pose for her. This is a time when Vogue and all those magazines Thandiwe uses for inspiration never features black models. Black beauty is never shown. But Thandiwe, she shows it all. Her women are black, beautiful, and proud. The type of photography that Thandiwe Muriu likes doesn't really have a name, and it might not even be a profession. It's not photojournalism, it's not commercial photography. Even Thandiwe doesn't know what to call it, but she does know what she loves to do. Create entire sets that feature at their center, at their core, women.
I wanted to create stories. I didn't want to record what was happening. I wanted to communicate what I was feeling or what I was experiencing, and not as a passive observer, but actively infusing myself in the images that I was taking.
Emotions are a crucial element of Muriu's visual compositions, both her emotions and those of the subject at the center of the scene. All photographers who work with portraits know that the chemistry, the alchemy that forms between subject and lens, makes all the difference. And every photographer has their own unique way to spark that process into life. Thandiwe's key tool for this is words.
I think part of taking a good picture is having a good connection with the person that you're photographing. As I photograph my subjects, I don't want to tell them what to do. I want to tell them how to feel or who I imagine they are. So let's say, for example, I'm photographing a woman for an image. I would tell them, you're a strong, empowered, capable woman, and I want that to show on your face as I take this picture. And it's amazing to see the transformation. They'll go from, sitting slightly casually to sitting more straight, straightening out their shoulders, lifting their head. And you can just see them, the words sinking in, and they transform into this beautiful, strong woman.
That feminist seed, nestled in her father's list of things to learn, blooms into a photography that is not only aesthetic, but political, and very much so. It starts with a woman standing straight on a chair as she opens her chest, raises her chin and gaze. It evolves into an image much more complex and symbolic. Take, for example, her most famous and iconic collection, Camel. Portraits of women surrounded by daily use objects, dressed and framed with traditional Ankara fabrics.
Kenya is a very patriarchal society, and so women are often hidden, or you're supposed to be quiet. So in my images, one of my signatures is to have the subjects blending into the background. And for me, this is a reflection on what I feel society in Kenya and in many other countries does to women. Women tend to just disappear into the background or into the fabric of society. But at the same time, the women in my images are difficult to ignore. They have a very strong presence. They're never smiling usually. And this is because they're not trying to woo or win you over. They're just simply being themselves, being confident in who they are. And that occupies space and gives them presence.
Behind much of Thandiwe Muriu's work and output are the small stories, like the tales informing many African proverbs. To pick an example among many, where a woman rules, streams run uphill. Women are capable of anything, of everything, and even where society isn't ready to recognize such power and status, collective wisdom does. Muriu is explicit in her intention to bring these sayings back into the spotlight and connect them to her images. Muriu chose women as the core of her work, and alongside them, she weaves the connection between past and present. Ankara fabrics are a practical example of how she views such a connection. Traditional cloth used for big occasions like weddings and parties, an element steeped in tradition. Each country on the continent has its own specific design and symbolism woven into the Ankara. The fabrics that Muriu includes in her images, on the other hand, feature contemporary prints and shapes. She uses tradition to build something new, an explicit attempt of many new Africa artists in their work. Previous generations had refused and rejected everything considered Western, rightfully associating it with a history of colonization and oppression of the African continent. The younger generations see it a little differently.
My generation is a little bit different. Rather than rejecting Westernization, we accept that it's a part of this global world that we live in. And at the same time, we look at tradition as something valuable, yes, but something that maybe needs to be blended with this Westernization to create a new hybrid of culture. I think we are in a place where we are finding out who we are, what is our identity. And I am definitely on that journey with everybody else. Through my work, I just invite people to journey with me as I discover what it means to be a woman, a modern woman living in a traditional culture.
This idea of sharing among women and sharing among younger generations as they seek a new African identity, is one of the main engines behind Thandiwe Muriu's work. When Lavazza offered her a collaboration for the More Than Us calendar, Muriu felt an immediate spark of synergy and harmony with her artistic and personal vision. It resonated with the story of her career, which was born through cooperation with and help from others. Her father and his old camera, her mother who cut old blankets and foil sheets, her sisters and the many women who, in their early days, posed as her models. If this small community of people hadn't existed, hadn't supported her, her life would have taken a much different path.
More Than Us, to me, captures the heart of community. I think if we are all living for the person next to us, our brother, our neighbor, this world becomes a better place. There is strength in numbers. There is strength in community.
For this campaign, Muriu has photographed Somali activist Waris Dirie. Dirie has used her career as model and writer to fight against gender-based discrimination, and specifically against female genital mutilation, a personal issue to her. From before her escape to Europe, long before her discovery as a model, and her career in the fashion industry.
I didn't know her story before, but there is so much to be inspired by. I think it's amazing how she's used her career and her position of influence to advocate for people who may not have a voice. What's especially amazing about her story for me on a personal level is that she's doing it as a woman. So often it's the men who choose what to advocate about and how loud it can be advocated for. So to see her so boldly and confidently just fight for the rights of girls is so inspirational to me.
Thandiwe Muriu describes her work as a photographer as one of constant discovery. Each new project enriches her life, not with certainties, but with gorgeous doubts. As an often quoted poem says, "A bird doesn't sing because it has an answer. It sings because it has a song."